Hello, Sharks. I'm Jonathan Little for PokerCoaching.com, here with poker extraordinaire Tristan Wade. Absolute master of poker. You've been playing a lot of cash games recently at the Wynn.
At the Wynn.
All over the place, but look at this cute little shirt. Can we zoom in on this cute shirt? That's the coolest logo I've ever seen. Okay. You played a cash game hand.
Yeah.
At the Wynn.
Interesting. Yeah, a couple weeks ago. Definitely exciting hand.
Let's take a look. So, under the gun, early-ish position, raises at $20 at 2-5, no limit hold'em. You're in the hijack seat with 10-9 suited.
Suited. 10-9 suited.
If it was offsuit, you would fold.
Offsuit, I would fold. This hand, sometimes I'm going to 3-bet. Sometimes I'm going to flat. In a game where I feel like there's more recreational players, I like seeing flops. I like playing flops. No need to bloat the pot against good players in or out of position.
I completely agree. If you look at the GTO charts we have at PokerCoaching.com, it's going to recommend a lot of 3-betting. But you don't want to be doing that against loose, splashy recreational players, especially if they're not going to be 3-betting you after you call, right? You don't want to call and then get re-raised by someone you have to act, because it's just like kind of a bad spot then. But if you know you're going to get to see the flop for 4 big blinds every time against 4 or 5 players, that's fine. Realize you're not going to win every pot, but very often the pots you win are going to be pretty big because you're playing good cards and your opponents are playing good cards and bad cards, right?
Absolutely. And that's a key point because when you come in with a range advantage or you come in with good hands already off the bat, you now have an advantage going to the flop. So if your players and opponents are playing too wide, you are going to be winning just playing solid hands from the start.
Right, like imagine you win, say you're 5 ways, imagine you win 22% of the pots, they win 18% of the pots. Something like that. That's just a little bit of an edge going your way. And the hands that you are playing have good post-flop playability, like suited aces, suited connectors, stuff like that. All right, we're 200 big blinds deep. Going to the flop. I suppose we are heads up. Looks like it.
Yes.
Flop comes 10, 8, 3. 2 spades. Do we have spades?
We do. 9-10 of spades. Yes.
All right. We have top pair and the flush draw. We have it all.
Big flop.
The opponent then bets $50. About the size of the pot.
Yes.
What does that mean in these games?
Man, that can mean a lot of things. It can mean they don't know what to do on a board texture like that, so they just bomb it. It can mean that they have a big hand themselves. So it's interesting here to proceed, right? Because we have a strong enough hand that's going to be not top of our range, but equity-wise, we're going to have a ton of equity no matter what our opponent has. So we can either raise, no problem. Whenever you have a pair and a flush draw, you can always put in more money, more or less. But having position and such a hammerlock on the board, it also calls for calling sometimes too to disguise the strength of your hand.
Yeah, it's... Well,
what are your thoughts?
When the opponent bets big in general, it should mean a very polarized range. And a lot of people in small stakes cash games are either betting big because they love their hand, like aces or something. That's not good for you. Or because they really want you to fold, which is fine, because then you want them in, right?
Yeah.
So this is a spot where either you're in, like fine enough shape against pocket aces type hands, or your opponent's in terrible shape with, I don't know, ace X or something, who knows what nonsense they could have. So I would just call here basically every time. It's tough with top pair and a bad kicker, because sometimes when you get it in, you're going to be against a set, or top pair, top kicker, something like that, and it's not that great for 200 big blinds. If you keep the pot manageable, you're really happy here. But if the pot becomes gigantic, it's not really that great unless you improve, right?
So if you did raise in this spot, you're mostly hoping that you just get called, and even that, you think the calling range is going to be somewhat conservative moving forward, where... Yeah.
Like, I don't think they're betting, king, queen, backdoor draw and calling a raise, right? I don't think they're betting ace, king and calling raise. It's going to be decent pairs, right?
They're not going to bet an 8x on this flop and go crazy. Most games. Some games out here, maybe. But you got to know your player type, and this isn't one of those spots.
For sure. When you're analyzing poker hands, you always have to ask, like, is my opponent reasonable? Because some people are, some people are not. Like, imagine your opponent's just going to take ace-8 and just pile their money in. Then, sure, raise and get all your money in, right?
Yeah, you should.
Like, as your opponent's all-in range gets wider and wider in terms of the made hand strength they're willing to get in with, you get to raise wider. So, like, 10-9 could just be a value hand a third of the time or 20% of the time when they get it in. And then the rest of the time, it's a really good draw.
Makes
but
sense.
I would just call here the vast majority of the time. Turns the king of diamonds, which is awful for you.
Not that good.
Because a lot of the opponent's bluffs on the flop, ace, king, king, queen, king, jack, all just got there, right? And then he bets $105, which is equally bad.
And then other hands can keep barreling, like ace jack, queen jack, whatever. That ace queen that might have picked up equity with a spade or what have you. So yeah, not a lovely spot for me. But I'm in position, still got second pair with a flush draw, so not going anywhere.
We're not folding. And at this point, raising makes no sense because now if he has a king, he's never folding, or probably not folding. And you're in pretty bad shape against that because you just lost half of your equity against the overpairs, right?
Yep.
Because there's only one more card to come. So easy call here. What would you do with 10-9 with no flush draw? Say had 10-9 of hearts.
Ooh.
It's a tough spot, right?
That would be a tough spot, and it would be somewhat player dependent on how often I think they're bluffing the turn and how often I'm going to face a river bluff or river bet. So if I feel like someone's just going to barrel twice and shut down, then I might be more inclined to call. If I feel like this is someone who's going to keep blasting no matter what, I'm probably going to just adhere to be a little more reasonable and fold and pick a better spot.
So the tough thing is that it's hard to know who's going to keep betting with queen jack and ace jack and whatnot on the turn, and then also bluff it on the river. Because some people will bet it on the turn every time, but then they become a little bit of a chicken whenever a lot of money goes in on the river, and they just check and let you win. Mm-hmm. If you're against someone like that, and I do think there are a lot of players in live cash games, especially at the smaller stakes games, who are like that. You give them the queen jack, they'll bet their open-ended straight draw on the turn. Is that what that is? Yeah.
Yep.
And then they will just give up on the river. If against those players, you cannot fold. Mm-hmm. And look, in general, if you're playing against a world-class player here, you also just can't fold. Can't be folding pairs. Middle pair is pretty good. There's lots of draws available. Mm-hmm. You got to hold on. 2
flush draws now.
Yeah.
Just having one of those, like an ace of diamonds, like ace jack with the ace of diamonds is going to keep barreling, that kind of stuff. So yeah, against a good player, you got to hang on tight here.
This is something that I have trouble with sometimes because I'm used to playing in like higher stakes tournaments against people who will bluff, right? Like I don't have to worry about them not having bluffs because they just do. But as you're playing against more and more straightforward players, especially if this is like a 1-2 game or something, they may not have very many bluffs. Like a lot of people when they bet big on the flop and big on the turn, they just have something they think is good. And middle pair actually does not do so well against things that are good. Anyway, you call, of course. You're never folding with a pair and a flush draw. That'd be ridiculous. Nope. River is a 10, the 10 of hearts.
Yes.
You make the trips. In this scenario, what would you do if your opponent just blasted? Your opponent bets $300.
I'm probably just going to call. If I had a stronger 10, ace 10, obviously king 10 is not doing anything but raising, and maybe queen 10, I might be more inclined to put in a raise with a bigger kicker, but here I would probably just call if they bet big.
Yeah, because when the opponent bets the flop and the turn and the river all big, they're saying I either have the nuts or nothing. So how does your trips with bad kicker do against nuts? What is nuts here? Like
king's full.
I mean, like ace 10 or better, queen 10 or better,
yeah.
Right? Like literal trips are better. Or nothing. If they have nothing, they're not going to call or raise anyway.
And then even if they have aces, they can maybe get away from that kind of hand.
Right.
Or ace king, they could bet and then fold to more resistance. So unless you know that this person is going to call you with a king here, like king, queen, ace, king, what have you, the safe play is just to call if they do bet big.
That's not what happened this time, though. In this scenario, the opponent checked. Now I want you to take a second to think about what you do in the spot with your trips. I want you to pause the video and write in the comment section below if you would be a super chicken and check it back. You didn't check it back, did you?
No.
No, okay, don't do that. That would be embarrassing. Would you bet small, like $100? Would you bet big, like $300? Or would you go all in for all of your money? How much is that? $800 or so. Pause the video and write what you would do in the comment section below. All right, we're definitely betting. We have the effective nuts. So the question is, how much should we bet?
Well, we got to think of the size of the pot first. And in this hand, the pot is about 340 or 350. And we have all options, like you said earlier. We have small bets, we have medium bets, we have large bets. And once we're checked to, I think our hand is a hammerlock to be good for the most part. And any of those bet sizings are options, but you probably want to be on the heftier side, in my opinion.
Well, so in this scenario, what are we trying to get called by? Especially is what you want to be asking yourself in games against players where you're not necessarily trying to be balanced. You're trying to just get called for a lot of money, ideally. Right? Like, what are we trying to get called by in this spot? And it's going to be a king, or pocket queens, or pocket aces, right?
Yeah.
So how much will a king call? Well, a lot, right? Especially when all the draws miss. You got to remember, all the draws missed here. So you Tristan, has a lot of busted draws in your range.
Absolutely.
So given you have a lot of busted draws in your range, you want to bluff some of them. And when that's the case, you usually want to bet on the big side. From a GTO point of view, you're probably not supposed to jam this one, I don't think. Like, you're probably supposed to jam full houses and, like, maybe ace-10 or better.
Yeah.
Because we actually could still be beat here every once in a while. Not very often, but every once in a while. But against players in the 2-5 game, they're probably not going to call with any king if you shove it all in for $800. They're just going to say, oh, fold, right?
Yeah.
So how much will those hands call, I think? 300 is quite nice. Something a lot of people do wrong in this spot, though, is they bet $100 with the idea of, I want to get called, without thinking and realizing that the $100 bet needs to get called 3 times as often as a $300 bet.
Key point.
3 times as often is a lot. Because imagine in this scenario, your opponent is going to check call, let's say, half of the time when they check. Well, they can't call 3 times 50, 150% of the time. It's not possible, right? So in this scenario, I definitely think that you want to go big, and the idea of I want to make sure I get called is not great, because what is going to call a $100 bet that's not going to call a $300 bet? Like maybe pocket nines, maybe?
Mm-hmm. Maybe some ace highs that just ace queen that decides to look you up or something because they're getting a good price, but that's not always realistic because that's not always going to happen.
But even then, like ace queen might call the $300 bet for the same reason, right?
Absolutely.
If they think you're bluffing. Also, you may find that some players will be a little bit more inclined to call a big bet than a small bet because they think you're trying to push them around when you bet a big bet. Although, you know, they're getting worse pot odds, they don't care because like, oh, why would you bet 300? Because you want me to fold. Therefore I call, right?
Yep.
So some people will get a little bit sticky in that scenario. That said,
key point though, you not to step on your toes there, sorry, but I love that you're talking about the psychology of the bet, the size of the bet, and then how often the bet needs to be called for it to be more winning. So in regards to a small bet versus a big bet, if a big bet gets called half the time, but it's 3 times bigger, and they're only calling the small bet twice as much, you're winning more money by the bigger bet.
Right. The way you can kind of think about this is imagine you bet 300 and they call half the time. Multiply 300 by half, 0.5, that's worth 150 bucks on average. Doesn't exactly work like that, but close enough. If you bet $100 and it gets called every time, it's worth $100. Which one's more, 150 or 100? 150 is worth more, so do that. If you're trying to be exploitative and not so concerned with the rest of your range. Sometimes you got to be concerned with balance and whatnot. But probably not here. Are you so concerned with balance in 2-5 games at the Wynn?
No, not at all.
No.
I play every hand how I play it, and this hand is probably an example of how you could be more exploitive against this kind of player when you don't have hands. Like an all-in here. Yeah.
Maybe that's a good bluff size, right?
Yeah.
Imagine if they're going to fold everything worse than a 10 to an all-in, and imagine they have no 10s in their range. Then you win the pot every time, right?
Yeah.
So fun stuff that comes up.
I have seen players fold hands that they are supposed to call with every time at those stakes.
Well, you're supposed to call sometimes when they go all in, and a lot of people don't. Yep. There's like, only top pair, what can you do? Put it in the muck.
Yep.
Give Tristan all the money.
And that's what happened this hand.
Well, in this hand, you bet 300, the size that, in theory, they could call with a king. Opponent called with a king.
Hey.
And you won. Ship the dough.
Ship it.
That's going to be it for today. Hope you enjoyed this video. If you want to see more Tristan here, let us know. Let me know in the comment section. What's your Twitter name so people can follow you?
Tristan Creative with an 8 in there.
Oh, that's creative.
Yeah, hey, I tried.
All right, if you enjoyed this, click the like and subscribe buttons. Have a great day, and we'll talk to you next time.
Hello there. Yeah, I'm talking to you. You want me to let you in on one little secret to take your poker skills to the next level? All you have to do is click the subscribe button right here. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah.
Very nice.